Well, thanks everybody. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Bill knows that I have to talk for a little bit about Outdoor Academy and Eagle's Nest, and then we'll have a few questions for Bill. In the meantime, please put your questions in that Q&A function here. Welcome to our 30 for 30 virtual environmental seminar, 30-minute conversations with some great doers and thinkers in celebration of 30 years of the Outdoor Academy. OA is a semester high school program for 10th and 11th graders who want to take control of their learning, connect with the outdoors, and feel the support and responsibility of living in community with others. For 30 years, we've been changing lives as part of the broader Eagle's Nest Foundation, where our mission is experiential education for young people, promoting the natural world and the betterment of human character. Our integrated, focused curriculum has introduced nearly 1,400 alums to rich topics in the environmental humanities for 3 decades. Throughout April, we're continuing that tradition with an exploration of craft, community, environment, and intellect, with this speaker series drawing on the experience of some of the best in the business. If you missed our earlier conversations in this series, you can find those recordings of those sessions with Noam Picalny and Don Chavez at the Outdoor Academy's YouTube channel, and where we'll upload all the recordings from this speaker series. Today, we are so delighted to welcome you, Bill. This is Bill McKibben. Bill's the author, educator, and environmentalist whose 1989 book, The End of Nature, is regarded as the first book for a general audience about climate change. He's gone on to write 20 books on the science, sociology, history, and future of the climate movement. With college students, Bill helped found the global grassroots climate campaign 350.org, which has organized protests on every continent for climate action. He played a leading role in launching the opposition to big oil pipeline projects like Keystone XL and the fossil fuel divestment campaign, which has become the biggest anti-corporate campaign in history. Bill's also the founder of Third Act, which organizes people over the age of 60 for action on climate and justice. Bill writes weekly and candidly on the climate crisis and action on his Substack, The Crucial Years, where you can get his informed take on the movement and a roundup of noteworthy climate news. So please find that, The Crucial Years, on Substack. Bill and I first met in Vermont nearly 20 years ago, if you can believe that, each working with students on different college campuses. His work as the Schumann Distinguished Scholar in Environmental Studies at Middlebury College gave him a front row look at Middlebury's Sunday Night Group, a student club inspired by their coursework and climate concerns that would evolve into the 350.org juggernaut. In 2010, we teamed up with students at my small college in Maine to return a Carter-era solar panel to the White House and demand new government action on climate. Bill wrote about it as a symbolic solar road trip to reignite a climate movement. He wrote that, quote, "Some of the movement will go on at the local level. Some will be done on college campuses. Some of it will be done in jails, but some of it must be done symbolically. And there's no more symbolic piece of real estate on this continent than the White House," end quote. Symbols are important to understanding and bolstering social movements. It's why Bill focused his recent book on the flag, the cross, and the station wagon. Bill, thank you so much for joining us. Why are symbols and symbolic action important? And why did you focus on these 3 symbols to explore the current climate and social situation?
Well, Jesse, first of all, what a pleasure to be with you. And many, many thanks for asking me, and many, many thanks for your good work at OA. There's a handful of these amazing programs around the country. And in every case, when I meet people many years later, they say that semester changed my life in profound ways. So thank you for making that possible. I do think symbols are important. Human beings understand the world through stories. We need science, we need data, we need statistics, we need reason. These are things that I traffic in extensively. I wrote the first book about what we now call global warming, what we then called the greenhouse effect way back in 1989. So I'm very interested in all of that. But I also know from now long experience as a volunteer organizer, that winning the argument is not even half the battle. We've known for decades, the argument has been clear and over in the scientific community about climate change. But you can win the argument and lose the fight, because fights generally are about money and power. And there, since we lack the money that the big oil companies have, we have to be able to appeal to other parts of human beings. And luckily, that's possible. There are things that people deeply care about, including, for instance, their affection for their country and the faith traditions out of which they come. I think both these things have been marred in recent years. It pains me as a Christian to see what passes for Christianity, especially at the White House level these days. And it pains me to see as someone who grew up in the town of Lexington, Massachusetts, giving tours of the Battle Green, it pains me 250 years later on Saturday to see the American story abused the way that it's being abused now. To see the very things that people wrote about in the Declaration of Independence being sent abroad to be tried for pretend offenses as one of the clauses in that declaration, to see that become the law of the land. I think it's important for us to defend those traditions, the traditions of American patriotism, the traditions of a merciful and just Christianity. And so that's why I wrote that book.
Fair. Thanks, Bill, so much. It strikes me that in the cross portion of your book, you talk so much about the role of religious communities in the movement for climate justice as being supportive but not central, right? That there's a certain new kind of role for religious communities to play. It's still important, and particularly important to what you describe as the inside-outside game in that book, and that others have talked about as well. What is that inside-outside game? What does that mean?
Well, let me give you an example.
Yeah.
I spent much of the day preparing for a multi-faith service we're going to do next week at Old North Church in Boston.
Yeah.
It's the public launch of a thing we're calling Sun Day, not Earth Day, but Sun Day, which will happen in September on the equinox, the weekend of the 20th and the 21st, and it'll be a huge nationwide celebration and call for renewable energy, the cheapest energy now in the world, but one that our country is now lagging badly behind in. But at any rate, we're going to have a kind of public launch of the idea at Old North Church, and we're going to start with a multi-faith service with some really powerful people. My dear friend Reverend Lennox Yearwood of the Hip Hop Caucus, and Anthony Smith of Climate Revival and the Black Church, and Diana Butler Bass, and just a wonderful collection of remarkable people there. And then when they finish, we're going to segue directly into a press conference, and we're going to light a green lantern off a solar panel up in the steeple of Old North Church where Paul Revere hung his lanterns, and send the message out that we're ready to go to work in September. I hope everybody listening here will start thinking about how they can play a role in September, what things they can organize, and you can catch the vibe by going to sunday.earth. That's the website. We're doing all this.
Oh, that's great. Say more about that inside-outside game, or the inside-outside
change,
job.
yeah. Change requires people able to work diligently on the inside, in the halls of power. And it requires people outside those halls of power, giving them something to work with. You know, we're coming up next week on the 55th anniversary of the first Earth Day, which was the biggest demonstration in American history. 20 million Americans, about 10% of the then population out in the streets. And the result of that was an enormous surge of legislation around the environment because politicians understood that this was something they had to do. Within the next 18 months, the corrupt Republican administration of Richard Nixon passed the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the
Yeah.
Endangered Species Act. They created the EPA, all the things that the Trump administration is trying to undo at the moment.
Right.
Um, and so that was a sort of perfect example of both the inside and the outside hard at work there.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate that. And I've found myself over the years relying on Joanna Macy's dimensions of the Great Turning, right? And so thinking about how to frame my own work in climate and justice movements according to those three archetypes or those three actions. There are holding actions that stop harm. There's infrastructure or systems change, like the structures that actually allow things to function. And then there's paradigm shift or that shift in perspective and view. And I found myself over and over in reading The Flag, the Cross, and the Station Wagon, thinking about those frameworks for action, and thinking too of the long arc of your activism that you have. You had even as a middle-aged man a front row seat at the college level. Same reason I went to work at colleges. I think maybe you have a different view. I knew, and it's the same reason I want to work here at the Outdoor Academy with young people. I knew that young people were like coming into their own identity formation and also had agency. They have autonomy. They can actually do something now. But when I think about the things that you can do and the way that you've talked about the opportunity for older folks in their third act to act in a different way, it struck me that the inside-outside game is also Macy's dimensions of the Great Turning.
Well, Jesse, I deeply enjoy working with younger people. And of course, I started 350.org with 7 college students here at Middlebury. And that became the first big global grassroots climate network. We have organized about 20,000 demonstrations in every country on earth except North Korea. Um, and I've loved watching the rise of youth climate activism. There's no one I enjoy working with more than Greta Thunberg, for instance, who's a wonderful human being um, and just a great, great friend. The only problem with all that youth activism is that I heard a few too many people my age say, "Oh, it's up to the next generation to solve these problems," which is unfair, but also impractical. Impractical because these are deeply timed tests. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has told us we need to cut emissions in half by 2030 to have some hope of staying on those Paris timetables. Um, you know, that doesn't give enough time for the Greta Thunbergs of the world to grow up and become CEOs and prime ministers and whatever. They're going to need some backup. And so that's why we started thinking about third act. There are 70 million Americans over the age of 60. That's the population of France. We have punch above our weight politically because we all vote. There's no known way to stop old people from voting. And we ended up with most of the country's resources. We're not by any means all affluent, but 70% of the country's assets belong to people in that demographic. And so organized together, we should be able to have some real effect. And so far we have had some real effect. It's been really powerful to get to organize. We've got about 100,000 people now and working groups in every state, and they're doing remarkable things. People had said when we started that it wouldn't work because people become more conservative as they age. I don't know whether that was true at one point, but not, I think, at this point. If you're in your third act now, in your 60s, 70s, 80s, it means your first act was in that period of great social,
Right?
cultural, political transformation, the period when we started taking women seriously in public life, the apex of the civil rights movement, that first Earth Day. So that's in our muscle memory, our generational DNA. And now that people are retired and have time, they're putting that time to work in remarkable ways. Most of all, to kind of, since we're nearer the exit than the entrance, to try and make sure that the world we leave behind is not worse than the one we inherited, which right now we're very much on track to leaving behind a shabbier place than the one we were born into. And that's not a legacy that any of us want.
Yeah. Uh, and it strikes me that people at different moments in their lives, whether they're first or third act, or in between, uh, can do different things in different places. That question of symbols, that it happens local level, it can happen in the jails, and it has to happen symbolically as well. Sometimes you're in a better position to engage in that holding action, to actually get arrested at the White House, to actually sit through that line 3 protest to keep the pipeline from coming through. And sometimes you're not. Sometimes your job is changing hearts and minds through the education programs you do with college kids, exploring stories from scripture that help inform a climate perspective or view, or the opportunities that we give students to take that Carter era solar panel back to the White House and feel again some of their agency, their autonomy. So I guess I really wanted to point out, through your exploration of symbols and my understanding of that great turning work, there's so much work to do, and it can look at different ways for you at different points in your life.
Yes, I think that's absolutely true. I also think that there need to be moments when all of us come together in
Mm.
particular things, because that's what gives them the heft to get something done.
Right.
Um, you know, um, one of the most important things an individual can do is be a little less of an individual and join
Mm.
together with others in movements large enough to make change. So, for instance, we're drawing on a broad coalition of groups and people to do this Sunday effort in September.
Yeah.
And if we manage to turn out all kinds of people, even though it's only for a day or two, that'll play its role in shifting the zeitgeist some, in changing people's sense of what's normal or natural or obvious.
Mm.
And and,
That's
and it's a happy, I mean, in a world where almost everything is going badly at the moment, this is one thing that's going very well. You know, solar energy around the world is growing faster now than any energy source has ever grown. We're putting up around the world the equivalent, the solar panels equivalent of a nuclear power plant or a coal-fired power plant about every 18 hours now around the world. And it's remarkable to see. California, the one place in this country that's really done what it should be doing, in 2025, I was just looking at the figures today, is using 44% less natural gas to produce
Mm.
electricity than it did 2 years ago in 2023.
That's incredible.
That's the most encouraging statistic I've heard in 40 years of working on the climate crisis. And it's
Yeah.
entirely due to the fact that they've put up huge amounts of solar energy and lots of batteries to store that power when the sun goes down. We live on a planet where the cheapest way to make energy is to point a sheet of glass at the sun. And we're going to try and get that across. This is no longer alternative energy. We're not talking about, I don't know, the Whole Foods of energy anymore, nice but pricey. We're talking about the Costco of energy, cheap, in bulk, available on the shelf, now ready to go.
Yeah. And it was primed to go those many years ago, right?
Indeed. That's why that trip was to Washington was so much fun, and in certain ways so despairing, because it was a reminder that we could have done this in large measure 40 years ago. And if we had, if we'd met Jimmy Carter's challenge of producing 20% of the country's electricity from solar energy by the year 2000, then the temperature of this Earth would be considerably lower, because that technology and expertise would have been transferred around the planet and quickly. Instead, we're now in a very, very, very hard place. March, we just got the numbers today, was the hottest March that we've ever seen on this planet. That makes about 25 straight months of record-breaking heat. And we're seeing physical systems on this Earth really begin to collapse. That's not fun to watch.
Yeah, and to maybe harp on the point, I mean, it seems clear that Carter knew that the solar on the White House was a symbol. It was a rallying cry, just as we suggested it should be again to the Obama White House in that trip we took in 2010. And as you asked of so many world leaders at the time to embrace this symbol and get to work on
Absolutely.
meaningful legislation, structural changes, and on changing hearts and minds about attitudes toward this energy.
And happily, a number of world leaders around the world took that to heart and have done just that. And we're seeing remarkable things happen in many places. We're not seeing those things happen as much in our own country, which is a shame. This is the country where the solar cell was invented at Bell Labs in New Jersey in 1954. This is the country where our scientists first understood what was happening with climate change. That's why it's so gut-wrenching to watch the Trump administration tear up all that scientific research over the last few weeks, fire all those scientists. It's a great betrayal of American history.
Yeah, and I think if I come back to the central thesis as I read it in that recent book of yours, it really is what you were saying about our sense of hyper individualism. That's what in some ways co-opted the flag and co-opted the cross and is expressed by the station wagon in so many ways.
And
absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up, Jesse, in the quintessential American suburbs at the absolute height of suburban expansion. At the moment when America was pouring more carbon into the atmosphere than any country has ever done before or since. And you're right, individualism exemplified in certain ways by the absolute domination of the car as the center of American life, but also exemplified by the fact that we turned our religion largely into a attempt at personal salvation, not at ethical and moral reflection, and that we stopped asking what we could do for our country and instead thought about how we were going to get ahead ourselves. That's what Ronald Reagan asked of us, and we did it.
We did it. Well, and it's not just the hyper individualism of. It's not just that we lost the moral and ethical compass of those religious communities, but we lost the community part of those religious communities in making it about this personal salvation in some ways, or at least that's what drew me to the church of my youth was the fellowship hall after the service, was the people, intergenerational hangout, eating everybody else's food, singing together.
What tradition did you grow up in, Jesse?
I adopted a Baptist, mainline American Baptist tradition in West Virginia for a time in my youth. So it was, it was really exciting that's how I found community. And I think that, in small town West Virginia, where I grew up, I think that those were some of the last bastions of that real social connectivity with a plethora of churches in small towns across the country. And I feel like something that we attempt to replicate at the Outdoor Academy and at so many of our sister schools in the Semester Schools Network and many other programs, people do this in other ways, is that responsibility and accountability to community. We're trying to rebuild the community circle, and I think that churches had a role to play in that in some ways, and I think that OA and OA alums find ways to do that moving forward in their lives, kind of as you have suggested about folks who've enjoyed these kinds of programs.
Amen. Amen. Preach.
uh, I also really appreciate, Bill, that you started out as saying that we really, as humans, need stories, and that's how we do make sense of the world around us. And I really heard that in the close of your book, that what works about the Line 3 protests, for example, and I think you were using that just as an example of the whole of the movement, is that people who are doing it right are making room for others in the story. They're making room for others to tell their story. And I've seen you do that so beautifully with young people throughout your career in a way that really attracted me to the work that you were doing and that I could help funnel young people into. And I see you doing that now in so many ways to help elevate others to tell their part of the story where it matters.
I'll just add that the other thing I think we desperately need as human beings is a lot of contact with the natural world around us.
Mm.
And that's, why I live where I live.
Mm.
But it's also now increasingly why I do this, why I'm so fascinated by this work around renewable energy. I have a book coming out this summer called Here Comes the Sun. Apologies to George Harrison. And uh, uh, one of the reasons that I am so attracted to it is not just because it's our one real chance at slowing the heating of the planet, but also because it connects us up with the most remarkable object in our universe. The one object we can't look at, but that's omnipresent in our lives, the thing that gives us heat and light and photosynthesis, and now is willing to offer us all the power we'll ever need. I, I was struck last year which wasn't as bad as 2025, but wasn't a great year in my opinion. But a great day in 2024 was just about exactly a year ago when in our
Yeah.
part of the world, the eclipse came across the sky and man, everybody I was on Middlebury College campus with the 1,500 college kids, and they put down their phones for a few minutes. It was very, very cool to see. And a reminder that we desperately need to be connected to this larger world around us, not to the stupid glow in our palms.
To the sun and to each other, that have
Amen.
brought people together, that have that universal experience. Well, our
Amen.
program, like so many, are phone-free programs for teens, and we find that the 15, 16, 17-year-olds that we're working with are just thrilled to leave their
Yes.
phones at home.
Yes, a chance to get away from it. Yeah.
Oh my
I
gosh.
reflect often. I mean, I have no choice but to use these things a lot in my work, but I reflect often on how lucky I was to get to live the first half of my life without them, and
Ditto.
it um, makes me sad that other people don't get that start anymore.
Yeah. Well, Bill, some of our students, as we've moved through 30 minutes and we can hit some of the Q&A, some of our students, our current students in semester 60, are watching online in a Zoom room in our library. And their teacher, Aiden, wrote in our question and answer here, as a current high schooler or OA student, what would your advice be for making the most helpful impact I can on environmental issues?
Uh, it, I think that you should find other people who are doing this and work hard with them. As I said before, this is not something, these are challenges big enough that we really can't take them uh, on our own. Happily, there's lots of groups that are, so for younger people right now, the Sunrise Movement, for instance, is a wonderful example.
Mm,
Chapters all over the place, or the Student Sierra Club, or whatever it is, a chance to really work with others for big change. And
mm,
young people are completely capable. I mean, the reason we got the IRA, this really important piece of legislation in the Biden years, was precisely because young people in the Sunrise Movement uh, uh, pushed for a Green New Deal. And by
mm,
the time it had made its way through Congress, that's what it had been watered down to. And thank heaven that they made that push.
mm. It's great. Yeah, I hear you. Find your co-organizers. Be a joiner. Find your community of folks who are going to increase your impact in some ways. Paige asks, in terms of power, it's easy to feel powerless in the face of the government and large corporations. What ideas do you have for how we can have power?
Paige, the two great inventions of the 20th century, I think, were the solar panel and the nonviolent social movement. This technology, really, that came to us from Gandhi and Dr. King and a million more people whose names we don't know as well. Um, and it's a way, it's the way for the small and the many to stand up to the mighty and the few. Um, and uh, so there's really, I mean, the only way to stand up to that kind of power is to assemble a lot of people in order to make change. It's not guaranteed that it's going to work, and right now is a difficult period for it, but it's what we have. So, I head into things like Sunday, determined to see what we can do to get as many people together as we can.
Yeah, and you've organized in order to engage people where they are so effectively over these many years. So some of this, of course, I've seen, Bill, is about folks coming to a particular place to do the thing, but also just the way that you and the students, now grown-ups, that you have worked with over the years, really invested in and empowered other people to make pieces of the movement their own, is one of the most inspiring things to me. So how can we be nodes in that network? How can we be hubs of activity in our own areas? I think is another way to organize for power.
Amen.
Yeah,
And, you know, just to give you the example that I keep using, uh, you'll get a chance to organize in September around this Sunday thing. And if you do, then it's a great kind of learning experience and a way to start down this path. There's no way to, I mean, it's useless to just talk about this stuff. The only way to learn how to do it is by doing it.
that's great. Many of you may have had an opportunity to do that recently at the Hands Off Rally days.
I was so glad too to see Margaret in the chat
Oh, good.
holding the Englers, Mark and Paul Engler, and their remarkable book, This is an Uprising, which I got to write the forward to. It's they really are remarkable chroniclers of this movement building that I've been describing.
That's great. Yeah, thanks, Peggy. You've been giving us all the good links this evening too. So keep an eye on that chat or scroll back through and you can open up all the windows that have been dropped in there and read up on these things afterwards too. We've got one other question here that hasn't been answered yet. What's a skill that you wish you could cultivate or magically implant into every young person to create a future that's aligned with your understanding of what we need to be
Well,
vigilant, resilient?
everybody brings their own skills, many of which I lack. And happily, there's other people who have them and lack the ones I've got. So everybody has things to bring. But I think uh, uh, a thing that is super helpful is just a sense of kindness towards others mixed with some kind of good humor about things. This is extremely hard work in some ways because, you always are up against power and it's sometimes desperately sad um, uh, and difficult, and yet also very beautiful. I find it helps a lot to be able to smile and laugh during it as best we can.
Kindness, yeah, kindness and humor. I appreciate that. And I'll close out by adding that I think that one of the best things we can do is to help people see that they're connected to each other, in addition to your emphasis on our connection to the land and understanding that connection as well. And I think it's a thing that we do so beautifully at the Outdoor Academy. And I do want to take a quick moment just to remind folks that we are part of a network of schools that do this good work. So check out the Semester Schools Network and find some of those other great programs like ours. Please learn more about the Outdoor Academy. We'd love to tell you more about what we do with high school kids. But also check out the Mountain School, the Island School, the Maine Coast Semester at Chewonki, High Mountain Institute, the Elzar School, School for Ethics and Global Leadership, and the Traveling School. These are great programs that are nodes in the active network of future resilience. Yeah.
You said it.
Yeah. So I want to remind folks that we have a couple more installments of this series coming up on the next 2 Wednesdays. Next Wednesday, I'll be speaking with your fellow Vermonter, Kate Stevenson. Bill, you know Kate, I hope. Kate's incredible as the founder of Helm Construction, has previously led efforts at Yestermorrow Design Build School, has been very involved in her local community energy district in Montpelier, certainly engaged in helping everybody understand the role that they can play in energy and building efficiency through the Northeast associations that focus on green building and renewable energy as well. And then the following week, join us for a session with Jim Merkel, who wrote Radical Simplicity, but also recently has been promoting his movie, Saving Walden's World, which focuses on women-led solutions to the 6th extinction. Encourage you all to tune in when we chat with Jim about that. And please join me as well at the in-person reunion for the Outdoor Academy, celebrating 30 years on April 26th here in Pisgah Forest, North Carolina, on our campus on Hart Road. And if you can't make it, Bill, we'll send pictures. Please join me in thanking Bill McKibben for an inspiring 30 minutes plus and for all the good work. Thanks for the stories, Bill.
God bless y'all. Take care.
Yeah.